It's very convenient that they put the US title right below the Japanese title on this one. Makyou Densetsu is known as the legendary axe in the US, and it gained a reputation as one of the premier action games for the TurboGrafx-16. It's easy to see why. On a system with a limited selection of games, it has a real opportunity to stand out. Makyou Densetsu is the PC Engine debut of Victor... they used a few different names. Right here it's Victor Ongak Sangyo, or Victor Music Industries. Later on there'll be Victor Interactive, so we'll just say Victor. Victor is one of the largest publishers on the PC Engine, with 39 separate releases, though for 10 of those I'm going to be merging them into other videos. If the gameplay in Makyou Densetsu seems familiar to you, but you can't quite place it, it might be because the game is a spiritual successor to the arcade game The Lord of King, which was released in the US as Astyanax. Acom developed the arcade game, and apparently when Victor came calling, they used a lot of the same game mechanics and visual design. Jaleco distributed the arcade machine, and eventually there was a Famicom port of the arcade game that they published. So Makyou Densetsu plays very much the same, but it's not a port or sequel. The title Makyou Densetsu can be loosely translated as The Place of Devils. The plot is that an evil god demands sacrifice from the various barbarian tribes in the area, and this year's sacrifice is Flare. Her boyfriend Gauguin doesn't like this, so he takes the village's magical tomahawk Sting and decides to go slay a god, rescue Flare, and then head off to Tahiti. The axe is explicitly called out as a tomahawk in the manual, which I guess makes Gauguin Native American instead of French. Really, he's just another Conan-style barbarian hero, as was popular at the time. Hey, at least it's some positive representation. The central game mechanic in Makyou Densetsu is that the axe takes time to charge up. That's the bar at the top of the screen. Initially, it doesn't charge at all, but as you collect gems, the tomahawk becomes able to charge to greater and greater levels. Upgrading to the next level occurs once per region that you pass through, though you also lose a gem when you die, but you can find more gems to restore that up to the maximum for that region. Basically, you'll start out only able to charge up to the second level, but you'll find a gem in those stages that will let you charge it up to the third. And if Gauguin dies before he finds that third power-up, the tomahawk then is only able to charge up to level 1, but there are additional power-up gems that will occur, bringing him back to 2 until he finds the power-up gem for that region. It's a little bit confusing because Makyou Densetsu uses the same power-up for the maximum possible upgrade as the regular upgrades, but it's pretty straightforward in practice. These power-ups can be dropped by mini-bosses or found in statues that are hidden. The statues are also where you find boring gems that just give you some points, and orbs that restore a bit of Gauguin's health. There's also feathers that permanently increase the tomahawk's charging speed, but those effects also go away when Gauguin dies. You can also find a key hidden in a statue that will unlock a passage, and there's also a statue that contains an extra life. Because of the charging speed, you have to get into a rhythm with your attacks in Makyou Densetsu. Hitting an enemy with any kind of power will often knock them back, so you'll find yourself striking with full power, then backing away from their counterattacks until you can strike them again with enough force to reset the loop. The difference in damage between the levels is pretty significant, so you never want to just swing wildly. If you get hit, the knockback is pretty severe, and later stages have plenty of holes for you to get knocked into. That makes Makyou Densetsu a game that rewards careful, patient play. There's no time limit and enemies don't respawn, so it's generally a good idea to stop and take your time whenever a monster appears. The monsters here tend to be relatively tough. There's a pattern that Makyou Densetsu repeats of attacking you with guys who require 2 or 3 hits to defeat, then you upgrade the tomahawk, and now you can defeat them in 1 hit. The enemy patterns are pretty easy to recognize, and they're conveniently color-coded for you. These orange guys just come at you, pretty easy. And then they get upgraded to green, which are tougher and jump at you. And then they get upgraded to blue, which throw axes at you. And they get upgraded to red, which slide along the ground at you. There's also stone men that will charge at you when you hit them, fish guys that will jump out of the water and lob a fireball, and salamanders that bounce around spitting... I don't know what that little dot is, but it's something. Something useful to keep in mind about the tomahawk is that you have an overhead swing when you press button 2. It has a bit more reach than the sprite animation implies. Very helpful for flying enemies. The bosses in Makyou Densetsu are a bit of a letdown. In Area 1, you've got bears. Just bears. They jump at you when you hit them. Okay, but the boss of Area 2 is a rock. A really big rock. A rock so big you can't jump over it, so you have to hit it and then jump to the vine and then drop down and repeat. The rock turns around if you hit it from behind, which honestly feels a little bit cruel. The third stage boss are these eye guys who come out in a swarm and just hover above your head. If you crouch, you don't have the overhead swing, so you have to wait until they clear off of you. They throw a spread of fireballs when they do that, though. And that's as far as I got in that recording session. There's 2 more bosses after this, but the last one is the only one that's kinda neat. And speaking of that last boss, the final stage is a maze of doors that don't connect in any logical order. One of those things that was common at the time, but really isn't that much fun. While I've been playing, you might have noticed that the music in Makyou Densetsu is really good. And you might think, well, of course, the game was published by a music company. But neither Victor nor Acom were responsible for the music here. Instead, Hudson stepped in and provided all of the tunes. I wasn't able to find out why they did that, but I think it worked in everyone's favor. If you had a TurboGrafx 16, you might be familiar with the legendary Axe 2, but the game has no relation to this one. Victor was definitely drawing connections, even in Japan, but that game had a completely different developer, and a game that played very differently, so it really isn't a proper sequel. Makyou Densetsu has a pretty good reputation in Japan among PC Engine enthusiasts. I saw people pointing to it as one of the highest quality action games on the platform. My own feeling here is the game's good, but it's not great. There's a few rough edges in how Gogan moves, and in how almost every enemy quickly retaliates to your attack. Jumping isn't quite as smooth as it could be. The attack animation could be a little bit cleaner. What it comes down to are a lot of little things where it's decent enough, but it could have been better.